Moderator.
Let me make just one other brief announcement, kind of the world at large. Some of you will be sad to know that Jürgen Moltmann, the leading probably theologian of our age, died yesterday at age 98. So keep his family in your prayers and the theological world. We've lost a bright light. Let's pray. Almighty God, creator of all that is, we praise your abiding guidance, for you sent us Jesus, our teacher and Messiah, to model for us the way of love for the whole universe. In his death and resurrection, we find hope for our lives. In our meeting together this day, grant us, we pray, to be grounded and settled in your truth by the coming of the Holy Spirit into our hearts. That which we know not, reveal in wisdom. That which is self-serving, repair with compassion. That which is despairing, fill with hope. That which is arrogant, restore with love. Give us open hearts, gentle speech, and humble spirits. Keep us devoted to your ways of life. In Jesus Christ, amen. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, I declare this General Assembly duly constituted and competent to do any business which may come before it. Please be seated. Okay. So we have one other quick announcement. She doesn't know this is coming, I don't think, but we specialize in surprising people. Alicia Munson, one of our YARs, today is her graduation day for the University of Saskatchewan, and she chose to be here instead. So let's give her a round of applause. And I think they've graced her with an appropriate headgear. You want to put your headgear on? So Alicia, come on up here. We got a card for you. Da 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 da. So this isn't your diploma, but it is a really large card with greetings from all of your friends and the other YARs. So congratulations. Oh, picture. Okay, sure. Right. Okay, good. Okay, we are back to the LMA report.
We passed recommendation 5?
Yeah, we finished 5.
Yeah.
Like this before, we finished 5. Yeah.
Moderator, we're on to recommendation LMA 006. And that recommendation asks that the disclaimer issued by the San De Soto be recognized as an equivalent to those issued by PCC theological colleges, so students wouldn't have to take additional courses to be ordained. And the wording to recommendation 006 is up on the screen, moved and seconded by the same two as before.
Okay, so this recommendation is before you, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? This basically is a follow-up on the others, as I understand it. Is that correct? Yeah. Seeing no one at the microphone, we'll ask for the YARS advisory vote. So YARS on this recommendation, all in favor? Any opposed? Commissioners, you are so advised. And now commissioners, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried.
Moderator, that ends our recommendations. We also have, we'd like to speak to Presbyterian World Service and Development with a bit of sharing and also a video. So at this time, I would ask that Teresa McDonald-Lee, one of the conveners of the Presbyterian World Service and Development Committee, talk about the work of the agency.
So hold on a second. We
do have the addition.
We have the additional
Okay.
motion, and
Okay.
now is the time for that.
Okay.
So, and that's what you're presenting? Okay. So the additional motion to LMA. And then microphone 1. Should be there. I think you're on there.
Hello,
Yep, now you're on.
Paul Wu from Presbyterian of Ottawa. I have a motion that the Life Mission Agency, in consultation with the Assembly Council, be instructed to work out a funding formula in support of the Sandy Soto Spiritual Center and report back to the General Assembly in 2025.
Okay.
I move, and seconded by Owen Mahaffey,
Of what Presbyterian?
Ottawa.
Ottawa Presbyterian. Okay, this additional motion has been moved and seconded. Let me just.
Hey.
So
Hey,
this is all okay to go? Would you like to speak to it?
Yes. As I stated before, theological education is expensive. If our end goal is to have more Indigenous ministry candidate, I think that opening the path, an alternative path, is the first step. The next step is find ways to fund it. And if we don't get the funding right, I fear that we're not going to get the desired result. I understand that there currently is a funding model for the 3 theological colleges. I'm not sure whether it's, we can consider reopening the funding model to have 4 colleges under consideration, or a new funding mechanism. I don't know. All I like is someone to look at seriously at how to fund this, so that Indigenous candidate, when they do take these courses through Sandy Soto, they would have same amount of funding as other seminary students in other theological colleges.
Okay, thank you. Is there discussion on this additional motion?
Moderator,
Go ahead.
could I ask the General
Sure.
Secretary to speak to this?
Yes,
Thank you.
please do.
In effect, the decisions that we made provides an alternate pathway for people in specific circumstances to be educated at a non-PCC college and then not have to go through education and reception. That is the effect of what we have just done. The PCC has 3 theological colleges with special and unique privileges and responsibilities in the church, and they are a fundamental component of the church's life, a valuable cornerstone feature of our life together. The colleges, as was mentioned, have receive funding through Presbyterian sharing from the national budget each year that the General Assembly approves. The money is distributed based on a formula that is decided upon by the colleges. The Life and Mission Agency report didn't provide any consideration for funding because it was not our belief or intention that there would be any need to change the funding formulas, because we're not accepting another college under our oversight and within the church's fundamental budgeting. If the denomination wants to make a change and add another college to the constellation of the 3 PCC colleges, that would be a significant change, and would require a great deal of consultation with the colleges, with the Assembly Council, with the Life and Mission Agency, and be quite a significant departure from what our tradition and our history is, and require a lot of changes to our oversight of the bodies. The colleges, as I said, have privileges, but they also have responsibilities, and we're not in a position to ask Sandy Soto to submit to any of the church's oversight the same way that the colleges have because of their historical connections. So all to say, the Assembly will do what the Assembly wishes, but I think it would be an exercise not undertaken lightly and would require quite a significant series of consultations before any changes were made. And again, the Life and Mission Agency's recommendations did not imagine that there would be any need to change the funding or to offer funding to Sandy Soto as a result of the decisions. Students going to Sandy Soto would have the benefit of access to certain bursaries that the church provides to support their education.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Ruben St. Louis from Waterloo Wellington Presbytery. I think just what Ian said at the end there are other bursaries and things like that for students. I think the main priority here for me is ensuring that the students who are going there are well supported. I don't know if that was the intent of this motion. There's the motion and then there's the intent of the motion. So I'm hoping that we don't even need a motion, because the intent should always be to support these students. And maybe that LMA should, we do have the Indigenous Ministries Fund. I think there's money out there that could support Indigenous persons going to Sandy. So I would speak against the motion, because I think there are other avenues to do the funding rather than a official funding formula. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Microphone 1.
Yeah, I'm Mary Fontaine, Presbyterian of Westminster. I just want the court to know something, that some of the problems that we have getting funding to go to school. The funds for Indigenous students that go to university, such as from, used to be called Indian Affairs, I don't know what it's called now, it's very limited. So sometimes we can't go to university just because there's no funding, unless there's some other way of getting funding. So that is another problem that we have. Just an example, when I was a student, or when I was on the Board of Education at Mistawasis, we would have 20 students wanting to go to university, and we could only fund about 5 or 6. And they have to be in an academic program. I don't even know if they would consider this an academic program. The restrictions of the government are very, very strict. They won't help anybody that's going into other things like filming or photography. My granddaughter couldn't go because she was taking photography. Anything that is, or even carpentry, anything like that is not funded. Strictly academic, and I don't know if they would consider this if it's not a degree program. So funding might be a problem even for this program. I don't know if they would, actually get funding to do this. So that's just another thing that I remembered. So if there was another possible way to find funding to go, yeah, that's always a problem. And that maybe that's one more thing that we can ask you to do is advocate for us, because the Indian Affairs is still way back in the 1930s. So we need maybe support. A lot of students are losing out because of these rules, these strict rules. Academics only, and you can't go. I was lucky because I was back home. I was still a member of the band, and still am, but just because you're a member doesn't mean you get to go. So that's, money is always a problem for students.
Other comments on this?
Moderator, I think.
There are bursaries available to students who attend colleges who are preparing for ministry in the Presbyterian Church. There are also additional continuing education or education funds under the oversight of the National Indigenous Ministry Council that are available for distribution. There were a number of funds that the Life and Mission Agency administered for students and for people who are already ordained or are leading Indigenous ministries to do further study. However, those have all been turned over to the National Indigenous Ministry Council as part of the decolonizing work that we're all engaged in as a church. There are also other loans, bursaries available as there would be to other students through the church, but also through presbyteries, through organizations in the community and the government. And I believe that this recommendation is about funding the school versus the question that was about funding students individually.
That's how are we interpreting that right? That this is about funding the school, or are there alternatives in your mind?
I'm
Microphone
glad to
one.
hear that there are various ways that students can receive funding. I wonder if the students are actually aware of these ways. So to me, I think funding needs to be considered, whether it's funding the school or funding individuals. And I just want an assurance, and I think the General Assembly would want an assurance that that there is funding available, and what are those fundings. And it wouldn't hurt to have Assembly Council or LMA to have a look at this and talk to the National Indigenous Ministry Council. And when the wording of funding formula, it doesn't need to be from an existing 3-college pool. It's quite flexible. So that's all I have to say about this.
Okay, thank you. Microphone 3.
Moderator, through you, Greg Smith, Calgary McLeod Presbytery. We are not talking about founding a theological college here. We are talking about lending our support and an avenue into Indigenous ministry through an existing spiritual center, which I believe has a funding formula in place. I think there's something in this conversation for me which sounds a little bit like a bunch of white people saying, we're going to tell you how to do this better. And that's actually the very essence of colonialism. We had a simple request that was brought forward. It was well considered by the agency, and it was brought to us, and I think we've considered it. I'm not sure that we need to do more than that at this point. So I am speaking against this additional motion.
Okay, thank you. Microphone 1.
Amanda Curry, Presbytery of Assiniboia. I just wanted to clarify that I would vote against this particular motion because I don't think there's a need for us to provide funding for the Sandy Soto Spiritual Center, at least at this stage. I hear the need to have confirmation and to know the sources of funding so that we can send as many Indigenous students will have the opportunity to be able to study there and at our other theological colleges. But that's not what this motion says, so I will be voting no to this motion. And I trust that through LMA and Assembly Council and other sources that we will open up as many opportunities for students to be able to study in the place that is going to work best for them to become future leaders and pastors and ministers within our church. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
Moderator Elizabeth MacLeod from Presbytery of London. I may be a little off here, but I don't understand how we could pass a motion earlier to allow an institution to provide education for ministry, and on our next motion not follow it up by funding and helping out. To me, it's sort of, let's put our money where our mouth is. We've done this in the past where the Indigenous communities have come to us and asked for help. We've put down on paper, but nothing's ever come of it. Are we doing that again? Are we passing something on a piece of paper to look good and see what we're doing? Or are we willing to stand up and say, now we're going to put our money where our mouth is and support them? That's all.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yars, do you want a vote on this one? Yes. Okay. Microphone 3. Yep.
Une Grace Co, Eastern Hanka. Moderator, I I turn my attention to TRC Call to Action 7. We call upon the federal government to develop with Aboriginal groups a joint strategy to eliminate educational and employment gaps between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal Canadians. And in thinking of this call to action, I'm interpreting the intent of this motion as a possible way to ensure that our Aboriginal siblings going through this new route of theological education, they are equally supported from our denomination compared to other students. I just think that it would be proper to have that in the report of an upcoming General Assembly, just to ensure that we're not going back to having gaps in the different avenues of theological education.
Thank you.
So I will speak in favor of the intent of the motion, although I'm not quite sure if the wording of this motion is in support of my interpretation.
Okay, thank you. Microphone 4.
Janet Taylor, Presbytery of the Northwest. I respect the intent of what is being done here. However, the motion says that we would be funding the center, not the students. And I think that would set a dangerous precedent, quite possibly. I know that funding exists for any student entering an ordination track within the PCC, and that there are not barriers between Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to the best of my knowledge and from my experience at seminary. I'm in favor of supporting students who want to go for theological education, but I do not think it's necessarily in the best interest of the PCC to vote in favor of supporting a non-PCC school with a funding formula. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll call for the question. We'll start with the yars. Yars, are you ready to vote? So all those yars in favor of this additional motion, please indicate. Yars opposed to this motion, please indicate. Commissioners, you have been advised. Now for the commissioners, all those in favor of this additional motion, please indicate. All those opposed to this motion, please indicate. It fails. Thank you.
So thank you, moderator and commissioners, for the good discussion. And the LMA have taken in everything that has been said and will continue to work with these
Okay.
motions that have
All
just
right, so
come.
don't
I
go
see
anywhere.
people.
We've got 2 mics.
Okay, yeah, I see that.
Number 1. Microphone
Sorry,
1.
moderator, point of order. I believe somebody pulled out LMA recommendation number 11 from the consent agenda. I don't want to
No, that was a
elongate
notice of
things, but
motion.
am I wrong or right
That was
in
the
that one?
notice of motion.
Oh, that was the notice.
It was the notice of motion came earlier to enable number 11 to be adopted.
Okay.
Isn't that right?
Hold on just a second. We're conferring. Thank you. We're conferring.
I assume a notice of motion was made earlier in the first event? Is that? Yeah.
So
Yes.
11 was adopted by consent, so we're okay on that one.
Yes, the notice of motion was made at an earlier
Right.
Sederunt, and then you
Right.
adopted what was a notice of motion. Yeah.
Just to be clear,
Yeah.
the notice of motion was made early,
Yeah.
and then at the beginning of the LMA report, the notice of motion was given. That was said. And then once it was adopted by the assembly, which it was, then it allowed that to be, it was included in the consent agenda that was presented. So it's all passed now.
What he said. Microphone 3.
Moderator Ed Hoekstra from Grey Bruce Maitland. And in terms of the LMA report, in terms of human resources, I'm a former missionary of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. And I'm just wondering, there's a vacancy in the Associate Secretary of International Ministries, and I didn't see that posted in the report. And Ron Wallace was my supervisor when I was in Malawi. And then it was followed after Ron retired with Clintus Williams. And I'd just like to know the status of that position right now. And then, of course, the newly vacant position of the Associate Secretary of Canada Ministries.
Okay, thank you. Can you address that?
Yes, moderator, the general secretary who understands more about the human resources department will speak to that. Yeah.
Whenever a position in the Life and Mission Agency becomes vacant, we review the job description, what the position's responsibilities are for. That process is even more formalized and in depth when the positions that are vacant are associate secretary positions. There's a process that's outlined in a number of documents, including the Book of Forms, about how associate secretary positions are filled. When the International Ministries position became vacant, the Life and Mission Agency Committee began to think about this process, put in place a committee to begin the steps, and they did begin that work. COVID got in the way a little bit. And then at the same time, or a little bit later, we heard that Jen DeCombe was going to be finishing up her work in Canadian ministries, and that work ended on Thursday last week. Jennifer completed her work in that position. So the Life and Mission Agency has been thinking about these two vacant positions, reassessing how to best use resources and redistribute the work in ways that frees associate secretaries up to do other work unencumbered from some of the administrative work. So while we're dealing with that process and trying to go through the formal process that the church requires us to go through as we begin to fill associate secretaries' positions, we're also looking at the mandates of each of the departments of the Life and Mission Agency and of the agency itself as a whole. And next year we'll bring forward recommendations to adopt new terms of reference for the committee and for the departments. So we're trying to do a number of different things at once to ensure that we get the best service for the church possible. In the meantime, the work continues. We have a number of people who are working on contract in both Canadian ministries and international ministries to ensure that the work continues and our relationships with presbyteries, in the case of Canadian ministries, and with international partners is maintained and grows. So there's no change to the services, no change to the work that's being done. It's just being done by a group of people on contract until we get to a place where we have new position descriptions and new mandates for the departments and for the agency itself. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Microphone one.
Harry Curry, Presbyterian of the Northwest. Is it possible, even though we passed a sick leave policy, I think by consent, can I ask a question about how to apply that? It'd be helpful for me as a clerk.
It might be better to actually contact the folks involved because they'll be figuring out how to apply the new policy.
Okay.
Okay, I think you'll get a better answer. Right, back to you.
Okay, thank you. So we are going to, at this point, hear from Teresa McDonald-Lee, moderator, who is one of the conveners of the PWS&D committee, and she'll talk about the work of the agency, and then we'll be able to see a video to give us some images. So turn it over to Teresa.
Good afternoon. Moderator, thank you for the opportunity to share about the work of Presbyterian World Service and Development. Presbyterians spend a lot of time debating the finer points of theology and biblical interpretation. However, the call to care for the widow, the poor, the alien, the orphan, and the prisoner have rarely been a cause for debate. The Word of God, found in Scripture and as revealed in the person of Jesus Christ, is clear on the imperative to care for those who are most vulnerable. And as Presbyterians, we do this work together through the Relief, Development, and Refugee Sponsorship Agency, PWS&D. It is a part of the Life and Mission Agency, but was set up as a separate fund of the church, and as such, it does not receive any funding from Presbyterian Sharing. In 2023, PWS&D received $5.3 million in donations from individuals and congregations of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. This includes over $350,000 to our Canadian Food Grains Bank account, most often through growing projects found throughout rural Ontario and across the country, and $2.7 million contributed in legacy funds and gifts of securities to the Loaves and Fishes Fund. And with those resources, PWS&D contributed $10.8 million worth of development and relief programs where most needed around the world. $3 million in development work, such as agricultural support, health programs, and livelihood opportunities to help people get out of poverty in places like Malawi, Guatemala, Haiti, Pakistan, and Nepal. There was an additional $7.8 million in emergency relief programming to help people who are affected by conflict and natural disasters in places like Ukraine, Afghanistan, Yemen, Gaza, and many more. You might wonder how PWS&D was able to turn $5.3 million of donations into $10.8 million worth of programs. We are grateful for the support of the Government of Canada and membership in the Canadian Food Grains Bank, which allows us to multiply and expand our resources through matching funds and our reach through collaboration with our ecumenical members and their partnerships. As a member of the PWS&D committee, one of my responsibilities is to review and approve emergency relief funding. I know that within days of a disaster, and sometimes even just hours, I will receive an email from the PWS&D office about how we will respond to a tragedy. We may be working through one of our international partners who have experience on the ground in the country affected on how best to get resources to those who need it most. It may be working through our ecumenical partners in the Canadian Food Grains Bank or at the ACT Alliance, who has expertise and experience in a country where PWS&D does not work. And through these international and ecumenical networks, PWS&D responds quickly and efficiently to disasters. Two of the places in the world where PWS&D has been active in the last couple of years have been in Ukraine and Gaza. Last year, PWS&D continued the response to the Ukraine appeal through both ACT Alliance and through the Canadian Food Grains Bank. These responses continue to this day, even if resources are becoming more scarce given other crises that have emerged. The war on Gaza has created unimaginable human suffering, and PWS&D is supporting the work of the Development for Service to Palestinian Refugees, part of the Middle East Council of Churches, in its work to provide humanitarian assistance, including invaluable psychosocial support in very challenging circumstances. To date, over $200,000 has been sent to work with children, families, and the displaced in Gaza. Thanks to undesignated funds given to PWS&D, the agency is able to respond to needs in many places that don't get much attention in the media. Our report, and I hope you do spend some time reading through the report, lists all of the contributions made directly to PWS&D partners in places like Malawi, Pakistan, Nepal, Guatemala, and Haiti. It also lists the projects supported through ecumenical collaborations at the Canadian Food Grains Bank, as well as the ACT Alliance. We were able to reach out in Yemen, South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Somalia, and in many more places. And in most of those cases, we did not issue designated funds, so this is made possible thanks to funds received to be used where most needed or undesignated. The refugee work of PWS&D is one of the most direct ways congregations in Canada participate in the work of the agency. PWS&D provided accompaniment to 19 congregations and 6 presbyteries involved in sponsoring 262 refugees in 2023. 99 of those refugees arrived in Canada in 2023, thanks to those sponsorships. And I'd like to bring to your attention that PWS&D Refugee Program Coordinator Binyam Gotyam is here at the Assembly today at the back. And so if you have any questions regarding how to sponsor refugees, he has resources for you. 3 months ago, I had the opportunity to visit the work of PWS&D's partner in Nepal, the International Nepal Fellowship. I can attest to the fact that we reach out to those who are often forgotten and marginalized in society, like people affected by leprosy and those who live with disabilities. Lives are transformed and people are given a new chance to experience life to its fullest. Thank you, Presbyterians, for your care and for your support. You helped a family rebuild after Cyclone Freddy in Malawi. You have helped people in Nepal access free treatment for leprosy. You have helped refugees from Syria and Afghanistan and Sudan settle in Canada. You have helped doctors in Haiti create life-saving porridge for malnourished children. You have provided shelter, healthcare, psychological support, and food for displaced people in Gaza. You have allowed children who live next door to a dump in Guatemala City go to school. Together, we can respond to the needs of the world with compassion and justice. I invite you to watch this PWS&D video.
Together through PWS&D, we respond to systemic poverty and injustice, as well as conflict and disaster. In 2023, PWS&D supported 58 projects in 27 countries. Your support helps people in need access food security, health, livelihoods, and human rights projects. Wilner Nezel, a farmer in Haiti and father of 4, joined an agricultural project, learning how to produce more food sustainably. His family now eats more nutritious food and sells their extra produce to make a living. An earthquake in Afghanistan left Guljan and her family without a safe place to stay. Her family received a tent, food, and other necessities to help them weather a harsh winter. Vital emergency aid, including food, water and sanitation services, shelter and health care, and psychosocial support, was provided to many in need. In 2023, PWS&D support helped sponsorship groups welcome 99 sponsored refugees to Canada. Your prayers and financial support helped make this possible. In 2023, your gifts to PWS&D totaled $5.3 million, enabling PWS&D to undertake $10.8 million worth of programming around the world. We know that when we put our gifts in God's hands, God does remarkable things. Thank you for being part of this story.
Thank you, Teresa and Guy, for the very short but informative video, which also will be available for you to watch. Moderator, we began the report earlier today with a video showing the work that the church does because of gifts to Presbyterians sharing. And we know that each year we are grateful for the gifts and the legacies that people have left in their wills when they have left gifts and legacies to the church in their will. So shortly there'll be names on the screen of those who have given generously, both throughout their life to the work of the church and have remembered the church in their wills. So moderator, we would be grateful if you would be willing to give a word of thanks and prayer for all those who remember the work of the church in their wills. Thank you. That's what I was told. Yep. Yep.
wait for the list on the screen. Let us pray. Generous, loving, and faithful God, you call us to discipleship, prayer, and work in the world you love, for the building up of your church and for the expanse of your grace in the world. To equip us for the ministry you call us to, you lavish the gifts of the Spirit generously upon us. We now thank you for the life and ministry of all who have given their time, talent, and treasure for the continuation of Christ's ministry, and whose earthly life is now ended, but who abide with you. Let nothing good in their life and witness be lost, but rather let those things be a legacy of benefit to the world. And let their faith and example inspire the faith and witness of all of us who follow them. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, moderator, for the prayer, and for all the commissioners as well, for listening and for contributing to the passing of the report, which we will do in a moment. We continue to wish you well, of course, for the remainder of the meeting and for this coming year, and we hope to see you at the Life and Mission Agency meetings if it fits into your schedule. So before I move the motion to adopt the report as a whole, could I bear or ask permission to give an announcement?
Sure.
A reminder to everybody, as you have left this hall and walked your way up to the cafeteria or gone to other places, you will have seen Caroline standing there with her light, ready to record you. And we are grateful for everybody who has stopped by, and she has had many people stop by to share their stories of hope and possibilities. But she's looking for more stories. So this is a reminder to everybody here to not walk on by, but to stop and have a short chat with Caroline about the things that are happening in your congregation, in your context that excite you and that you would like to share with the church. And then all those stories will come together and we'll be able to share as a community as we are connected together. So just a reminder not to walk on by when you see Caroline. So moderator, I would move the report, I won't, Amanda will remove the report and John will second the report as a whole.
The report as a whole is before you. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we do have 15 minutes, so we will move on to the NIMC.
Moderator, I'd like to introduce the WNIMC. Hello, Tanse. I'd like to, moderator, introduce the members of the NIMC. We are part of the group that wrote our report. We hope you have had time to read it. On the right is Keith Head, Commissioner for Commissioner for the Presbyterian of Northern Saskatchewan. And you all know Stuart Folster, also from the Presbyterian of Northern Saskatchewan. And you all know Yvonne Bearable from the what's Presbyterian again? Presbyterian of Winnipeg. And she's the director of the Kenora Fellowship Center. And Allison works faithfully with us and helps us so much. She should be up here with us. And we're very grateful for Allison and for Catherine and all the others who help us. So thank you. Amanda helps us a lot too. Amanda, where are you? Yeah. And I needs to be in here. Can you see us all? Thank you. Yeah, it's up to, yeah, you'll be standing. Well, you won't be standing that long, but it's up to you. Thank you. I trust you have read the report. I just want to add a few things. The report moderator has 2 recommendations, and I'm the convener of the NIMC, the National Indigenous Ministries Council, from the Presbytery of Westminster. Keith Head, Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan, is our seconder. And just want to say a couple of things before we move on to our recommendations. We've met 3 times over the past year, once by Zoom and twice in person. Just wanted to say we've worked very hard with our work on the apology that's going to be up next, a renewed apology, and also for the work that the matter of the new pathway for ordained Indigenous, potential Indigenous candidates for ministry. And that special committee was formed for that work. So thank you for your support for that. I just want to also thank you for considering the renewed apology that will be coming up next. So I think with that, we can move on to the recommendation.
It's on the
Okay.
board, so
Did you want me to read that?
you don't need to read it, just you want to address it before we,
Yeah.
you want to say anything about it before we call for the vote.
Yes. I have to read it down here because it's easier to read. So in urging all grant committees to reflect on our denomination's commitments to United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, we are finding that every time we were asked to consider a grant for some sort of Indigenous ministry, we were having to discern it, but we're hoping that those that also that deliberate the grants will also consider what they call the UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, when reviewing those grants, so that we don't have to do it all. Because I think things would go more smoothly if everyone was on the same page with that. We'd appreciate that very much. And I think did you guys have anything else to add to that? No? Okay. So that's the reason that we have made this motion.
Okay, so we, I think, are ready for the vote. The YARs have asked for an advisory vote on this. So YARs and students, all those in favor of this recommendation, please indicate. This is YARs and students. Any opposed? Commissioners, you have, I should have asked for the vote first. Oh, well, there's nobody standing at microphones. Does anybody want to say anything? That's too late. But anyway, no one's standing at the microphone. So commissioners, you've been advised by the YARs. All those in favor, please indicate. All those opposed, that carries.
And our next recommendation has to do with, moderator, sorry, got to do this officially, has to do with requesting in our aim to make Indigenous people visible and to remain in front of your face, so to speak, to be there, we would like you to consider having an Indigenous person attend a general assembly every year. And that's the reason that this is recommended, to keep us in your sight, so to speak.
Okay, all right. So this is before you. Are there questions, comments? Yep. Microphone 3.
Moderator Jake Van Pernis from the Presbyterian of Calgary-McLeod. I am supportive of this motion, but just have a question. Is this a Indigenous person from each presbytery, or just one presbytery?
Good.
I think we're thinking of just one Indigenous commissioner every year, in addition to whoever's. Now, can you come and address that, Yvonne? Is that what you intended? My understanding is that there would even, there's only 4 of us. So we're not always available. It's not always our turn, like this year, it'll be another few years before I can come back as a commissioner. That's the problem. So, but at least one of us 4 would be able to come each year. Is that the way you understand it? Yeah, I think that was our understanding. Yeah.
Although, well, yeah, I mean, the way it's written is that each presbytery would try to send an Indigenous person. I mean, it's an encouragement for presbyteries to send an Indigenous commissioner.
Okay.
That's
okay.
Which is more than one. Which is
why I asked if you could clarify that. Stuart, did you want to? My understanding is that one, but I think there was a different understanding from, yeah.
Okay, Stuart Foster, Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan. Yeah, my understanding when we considered this, that presbyteries would try to encourage one Indigenous person to attend General Assembly each year. And I realize the difficulty behind that, but I think we need to work towards this. So I would I would really encourage everybody, I guess, to try and get these Indigenous people to be ordained at Sandy Soto Center as quickly as possible. And in my presbytery, right now,
including youth,
my elder from Mistawasis, Keith Head, and I are the only 2 people that qualify. So the other thing that NIMC and the Presbyterian Church may need to work out is to find alternate ways of making this happen. For example, is there some way that our Indigenous ministries, Indigenous missions, street missions, like Kenora Fellowship Center and Saskatoon Native Circle Ministry, is there some way that the board members could be qualified to be a commissioner? So that's another thing that we can consider. But right now, I understand it as encourage presbyteries to try to send an Indigenous person each year. And also with Northern Saskatchewan, we only send 1 commissioner each year. So what about the rest of those churches, right, that are not Indigenous? So it's a dilemma for us.
Sure, thank you. Yep. Microphone 3.
Will Ingram from Presbytery of East Toronto. I'm certainly in support of the motion. I'm trying to think as a presbyter, it's virtually impossible to know if another presbytery has nominated anybody, has anybody who would qualify. And I'm just wondering, within our polity. If there's any possibility of just reconsidering this motion, and I don't have wording for it, but it's more a question for the clerk. Is there any way within the polity to designate a special status for, say, 2 Indigenous commissioners a year that wouldn't be appointed by the presbytery, so that, but in actual fact, that would give us flexibility to make sure that the voices are here, even if a specific presbytery or the coordination piece of how presbyteries do this together. I just think it would, because of the significance of what this is asking for, I'm wondering, could there be a special status for 2 Indigenous commissioners in that sort of special category each year?
They are conferring.
Moderator, there are guidelines for what constitutes a commissioner to the General Assembly. And at this point, we wouldn't have any ability to go beyond those guidelines. So if the Assembly wanted to change it, it would probably end up in a Barrier Act legislation that would change the guidelines for what constitutes a commissioner to the General Assembly.
Okay, I think microphone 1 was next.
Gail Johnson Murdoch, Presbytery of Pictou. I think this is a wonderful and an encouraging idea. As an East Coaster from where I am, our Indigenous community is all Roman Catholic. And I am concerned that I wish for them to have a voice, and their stories are not becoming part of here. And I just think that's something we need to be concerned about and make sure that all across Canada has a voice where they can share their stories.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Moderator Greg Smith, Calgary McLeod. Certainly I support the recommendation. I'm just wondering, and I don't want to try to put something together here on the floor, but I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile for perhaps the NIMC, perhaps other agencies in the church, to look at the possibility of creating a national Indigenous voice, which would be present at General Assemblies, which could then take in representatives from ministries, whether they were commissioners or not. We do have our YARs offering us advisories on various matters, and perhaps it's time that we consider a national Indigenous voice at each General Assembly that can be composed of any number of Indigenous peoples.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Harry Curry, the Presbytery of the Northwest. And again, I don't have any problem with passing this motion. Presbytery of the Northwest probably has as many Indigenous people within its bounds, but I don't know anybody that would actually qualify as an elder or a minister for us to send to assembly in our presbytery. And I think the way we deal with this is some of us here creatively think about an overture for next, not now, but present an overture how we can have Indigenous voices at assembly, and maybe that means changing how we do commissioners. So that's my recommendation to everybody, to think hard how we can get Indigenous voices here on a regular basis. Thank you, Moderator.
Thank you. Microphone. Okay, we're going to go with 3. 4, we'll get to you.
Moderator, sitting here, I think we have a polity issue, as the clerk mentioned, and listening to the comments of the convener and of Stuart, I'm not sure that really, I've heard different things. So I'm going to suggest wording for a possible referral that if at the end of my reading, Mary nods yes, I'm going to email to Terry Lee. And if Mary shakes her head no, I'm not going to do anything with it. But I'm wondering if what the committee is actually asking is the following. that the agencies of the General Assembly ensure that a representative from one of our Indigenous ministries be present at a General Assembly each year. That way, they don't need to be an elder and a commissioner the way we normally think of elders on sessions being named as commissioners. I don't know if that's what the committee is intending, but if it is, I'd gladly email it to Terry Lee.
I think this is a sort of a moderators, that the NIMC, that is in fact their role. That they would, even if they're not commissioners, there would always be NIMC representatives here. And the report is received every year. It comes from their deliberations every year. My sense was this was, how do we get the presbyteries to join in that wider concern? So, and we are also at time for the stated hour on the apology. So I'm going to suggest that we come back to this. We haven't voted on it, and do the apology report, and then this will be the first piece of business we come back to. Okay, let's do that. So we'll hold you on. Right. So we'll go to the special apology. The coordinator of the special apology, and we will come back to this later.
Okay, so it's not complete yet.
It's not complete. Yeah, thank you. So stated hour for the special committee on the renewed apology. Martha's right there. And I think this is the one where we need with Dylan, we need a Zoom link. So we're going to establish a Zoom link.
He is ready. He is ready on Zoom.
Okay. So members of the special committee, just when you're present, we have places for you here, and we will get that Zoom link up on the screen.
Sorry, Mother. Oh, hi.
There you are. Dylan, would you check? Would you say something? Let's make sure we can hear you.
Hello, hello.
Gotcha.
Can you
So,
hear me?
yep, and you can hear us well enough.
I can hear you just fine. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, Dylan. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
you ready? Okay.
Yes.
A moderator, I am Martha Ferguson, and this is,
Dylan Nippy.
we are the co-conveners of the special committee regarding the apology for residential schools and colonization. In 2023, the National Indigenous Ministry Council put forward a recommendation to General Assembly that the Presbyterian Church in Canada draft a renewed apology for its role in colonization and the operation of residential schools. The recommendation was approved, and a special committee was formed to take on the task of drafting the apology. It had members appointed from the National Indigenous Ministry Council, the Life and Mission Agency, and the Assembly Council, and met 5 times, 4 virtual meetings, and 1 2-day in-person meeting in Saskatoon. The discussion and eventually the content of the apology was framed within the context of questions like, why an apology now? What is distinct about an apology? Why do we need it? What's different about this being done now? And what was done with the 1994 confession 30 years ago? One of the things that emerged early on in the meetings is that neither the words apology or sorry appeared in the 1994 confession that the church made regarding colonization in residential schools. The group agreed, given that the truth, that was not so much a renewed apology as an apology, full stop. In 1994, confession was set the church on the path of reconciliation, but learning to walk the path, the church understands more deeply now the harm it caused. This was very difficult work for everyone on the committee, especially our Indigenous members of the committee.
And so as we proceeded with the apology and all its details regarding everything that surrounded it, it kept coming up. Why did we need an apology? What, I mean, the answer was pretty straightforward, but what's so different about what we had before? But it was something that struck one of our members, of the harm that was caused, and it having involved a lot of death. And so it didn't feel right to move forward without some sort of apology, and instead of an acknowledgement. And there's much to say about the whole apology for itself, but when it comes to speaking directly to people, and especially the nations of the many nations of Turtle Island, and the things that this has caused them, stress, anxiety, and all the things that we see around each other, I can't help but imagine how long overdue this apology must feel, and how we all are ready to start the journey of reconciliation, and how we are crossing the bridge between acknowledgement and beginning the painful road of lamentations, and how this and much of our Bible was written in due process. And within that process, we find many painful pieces that we have to go through in order to move that forward. And I feel that at this time was the perfect time in order just to make something new, make something that I want to say acclimates with everybody, that resonates with everybody. And we feel that it's comfortable to represent an apology that can fit all of Turtle Island. And I mean Turtle Island because that's how our people speak about Canada, and just the United States, and just North America involved. But, going from BC all the way to Nova Scotia and all the nations in between, I feel that this piece that we've done and that we've made far outreaches the confession, and is really meaningful, and something that has been a long time coming and will be accepted. And hopefully it furthers us in our work with Indigenous peoples of Canada. And I think that's the goal. And that's
Thank you, Dylan. I now ask Reverend Folster to come forward.
Moderator, commissioners, and guests. Bonjour, Desnikas, Pape Makwa, Shanu Dundam. My name is Laughing Bear, and I belong to the Eagle clan. My Christian name is Stuart. Originally, I wrote part of my story in graphic detail, but one of my elders advised me that I don't have to share that. She said, leave it in the past. It happened in the past, so leave it there. When we worked on the apology, I shared that story with the committee, and I got very ill from doing that, and so I needed time to heal. But I want to give you just a a summary of that story. I'm dealing with the generational effects of the residential schools. And I believe that in healing and reconciliation, first we have to admit that we've done something wrong, that we've hurt another person. And then we have to sincerely apologize for what we have done wrong and make sure that person understands that we really are sorry for what we've done. And then the third thing is restitution. What can we do to make up for what we've done wrong? Almost a year ago, last August, my granddaughter committed suicide. And I was married the first time at age 19. My ex-wife was 16. We had 3 children, and my ex-mother-in-law attended the residential school at Portage La Prairie, which at one time was run by the Presbyterian Church in Canada. In 1987, my ex-wife committed suicide 3 years after I had remarried. In 2005, our son died from a drug overdose at age 34. My granddaughter left behind 6 children, and that was the saddest funeral I've ever done. It was so emotional. Her brothers and sisters, her brothers were arguing and threatening each other during the wake service. So it took forever to calm them down so that we could actually get on with the wake service and somehow try to hold it all together. So in terms of restitution, I think all of us here all across the church and of course my family, we need to do the best that we can for my great-grandchildren so that they have the best education possible, they have the best life possible, a successful life with love and peace and hope. And so that's what we're facing now for the future. And every one of the missions that we have 8 different missions in the Presbyterian Church, the indigenous ministries, and they're all dealing with the same kind of story that is part of my story. So God bless all of you for having me here, all my relations.
If I remember my church polity, prayer's always in order. Let's just have a moment of silence and absorb Stuart's story before we move on with our motions. Let's just close our eyes and let's absorb the story. I just personally want to thank everybody that is here today from our Indigenous representation. You've taught all of us, and it costs you when you teach us. But we need it. Dylan and I got a little sense of humor going on, and I said, you can't leave us settlers unsupervised, but I know what price it's cost you, all of you. Okay. Dylan, I'm going to present 1 and 3, and you're going to present 2 and 4. So we will start with the first recommendation to adopt the apology included in the report of the special committee. These motions have been passed. Hang on. The mover and seconder of these motions are Amanda Curry of the Presbytery of Assiniboine and Stuart Fulster, member of the Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan.
Commissioners, this recommendation has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Okay, seeing none, the YARs have asked and students have asked for a vote. Are you ready, YARs? For this recommendation, this is YARs only. All those in favor?
I've been voting. Yeah, I see that.
Any opposed? Okay, commissioners, you have been so advised. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried.
I now ask Dylan to do recommendation 2, please.
So recommendation 2.
Recommendation 2 is a recommendation that the apology be translated to at least Dakota, Ojibwe, Soto, Plains Cree, Nuchano, Central, Nuchano, Korean, and French. The recommendation includes those particular Indigenous language, as they are languages spoken by some of the nation's most directly impacted by residential schools of the Presbyterian Church in Canada operated. Let me see this part. Yeah. So the mover and seconder for this report are Amanda Curry, Presbytery of the Assiniboine, and Stuart Fulster, Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, this is moved and seconded. Microphone 1.
Moderator, my name is John Barrett from the Prince Edward Island Presbytery. I'm moving an amendment that is seconded by Doris Taylor, who is also from the PEI Presbytery.
Okay, hold on. Let's just get it up. You already submitted it? Okay, let's get it up on the screen.
Whereas the mover and seconder both reside in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation, and whereas the native language of the First Nations people who reside in the 4 Atlantic provinces is Mi'kmaq, and whereas there exists today many survivors and intergenerational survivors of the residential school that operated in Shubenacadie, Nova Scotia, we therefore cause to move an amendment to recommendation SCAQ 002.
Thank you. So we are considering the, the motion to amend. It's as on the screen, adding Mi'kmaq to the list of languages. Is there any discussion? Does anybody from your committee want to comment?
Dylan, do you want to comment on this? It's expanding the list.
I think must be a no. So, Dylan, did you hear that question?
So they're just expanding the list to include Mi'kmaq.
It's expanding the list of languages.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mi'kmaq. Oh, yeah. Yes, I did. That. See, that's okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm okay with that.
Okay. That's a good way to phrase it. Okay, and Yars, I'm assuming you will want a vote. So are we ready for a vote on this motion to amend? Yvonne? Microphone 2.
Amanda Curry, Presbytery of Assiniboia. The suggestion coming from Mary and folks here was that there might be some freedom to add some additional ones so that there wouldn't be a community that was missing. So if we leave from here and we discover that there might be another language that would be important to include, that there might be some freedom and flexibility to do that.
Our advice is that since it says at least, you already
least.
have that permission.
Indeed, that's a good point. It says at least.
So they'll say, okay.
But we can still vote on this one because we've already identified it as an important one. Any other discussion on this motion to amend? YARS and students, are you ready to vote on this? So YARS and students only. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Commissioners, you are advised. We're now voting on the motion to amend. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Now we will take the amended motion when it gets on the screen. Okay, there we go. So this is one of those moments where, yes, you're going to vote on virtually the same thing again, but that's the way we do things. YARS, you ready to vote again on this? So for YARS and students only, add the amended motion, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Commissioners, you are advised. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you.
Just before I read recommendation 3, I want to share, you hear another voice. Reverend Roberto of Treaty 6 is with Dylan. Many of Dylan's support are with us today. So if you hear a different voice, it's not Dylan. He's got some support. Recommendation 3 is a recommendation that all courts of the church be encouraged to study the apology, deepen their understanding of the need for reconciliation and decolonization, and seek out resources to continue learning on how to best live out the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, especially those aimed at the churches, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, and the Church Repudiation of the Doctrine of Discovery. This has been moved by Amanda Curry, Presbytery of Assiniboia, and Stuart Fulster, Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan.
Commissioners, this recommendation is moved and seconded and is before you. Is there discussion? Microphone 4.
Laura Payne, Presbytery of Oak Ridges. Would it be out of order in the spirit of this recommendation to ask that the apology be read aloud, whether it is now or some other time during this assembly, so that we may all express it appropriately?
Right. It is already scheduled to be read tomorrow afternoon in a ceremony.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other comments, YARS and students, are you ready for the vote? For YARS and students, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Commissioners, you are advised. Commissioners, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried.
Dylan, recommendation 4, please.
And so recommendation 4 is a recommendation that the special committee continue its work over the following year to develop additional guidance for the denomination toward the need for reconciliation, including how to best animate the apology and report back to the General Assembly in 2025. And so the mover and seconder for this report are Amanda Curry, Presbytery of Assiniboia, and Stuart Fulster, Presbytery of Northern Saskatchewan.
Thank you. Commissioners, you are have heard this is moved and seconded. Microphone 1.
Moderator Paul Wu from Presbytery of Ottawa. I'm speaking in favor of this motion, and during the pre-assembly discussion on, via Zoom on this particular motion, I brought the idea up, and I think that the idea is that the special committee's work, the ongoing work in the following, in this coming year, will be disseminated throughout the year, so not having to wait until 2025 General Assembly. Some of their recommendation on how best to animate or on how to bring this apology to a indigenous community some of the best practices. I think that those type of things can be disseminated as they come in. So I just want to
Okay,
just
thank you.
express that.
Okay, thank you. Does the
So,
committee have a?
moderator, can we do two things at once? Can we work on it during the year and still report back? So I don't think anything in this motion says that we can't work on it during the year and then still tell you what we've done with our year, if that's okay with the court.
That seems fine to us. Any other comments or questions? Yars, get ready. I'm coming back at you. So Yars and students first. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Commissioners, you've been advised. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried.
Okay, help me with my polity here. Do I have to move the report of a whole now? Okay. I was so worried about the first four things. Anyhow, I move that we accept the report as a whole.
And it's seconded by, you have to, who's the same seconder and mover?
Reverend Amanda Curry of Assiniboia
Right.
and Reverend Stuart Fulster of
They move.
North Presbyterian.
Thank you. Okay, the report as a whole, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you.
And I guess I'm allowed to comment now, and I would just like to thank Dylan for walking with all of us. We were a committee that was settlers and Indigenous people. I've learned every second of the walk. I'm proud to be walking with you. You have shared your wisdom, and when I was nervous today, you helped me again. So thank you so much for bringing everything to our church, teaching us as slow as we are, and being patient with us as we walk the journey. Dylan, would you like to comment on anything?
I just, like to thank you for the opportunity that I have just to have a voice and just be able to speak on behalf of the many nations across Turtle Island, as well as the leaders in the PCC. And that's it. So.
And I'd like to mention we all appreciate Allison Carr walking with us patiently and being the glue for all of us. So thank you very much, moderator.
Thank you very much. We are going to take a quick break. Don't go too far. 2 minutes. Commissioners, we are calling you back. Commissioners, would you find your seats, please? And let me just say, we can't tell time. That was the most generous 2 minutes y'all have ever experienced. So we are back to the NIMC report. Mary's in the middle of talking. Mary, we're back to the NIMC report. And we see you, number 4. We'll be there in a minute. Do we need? So we're going to finish up. So we're going to finish up recommendation 2 of the NIMC report, if that could be up. There we go. So we were partway through this, and we had somebody at microphone 4 who's come back. Thank you. Microphone 4.
Moderator, my name is Adam Hanna from the Presbyterian of Vancouver Island. The way this, I'm speaking in favor of this recommendation. The way it reads to me is that it encourages our presbyteries and our individual churches through those presbyteries to promote the ordination of Indigenous ruling and teaching elders in order to be able to have more Indigenous voices, not only at our national church, but at our local churches and presbyteries as well. So I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. So. Hold on just a second. We're still conferring. Mary, come. Okay, we're working it out. So we're going to go ahead and vote on this motion. And there may be other things afoot, and we will see if that results in what we're going to do is not close this report. There may be some consultations going on during the assembly itself, so we won't close this report, but we will vote on this motion. I'm reading this as an encouragement to presbyteries, as written, encouragement to presbyteries to try to commission an Indigenous person as a part of your presbytery. So we'll leave it at that. It's good encouragement, and we'll vote on that as it is. And then if they have further consultation, they can bring back an additional motion. The report will not be closed. So we'll finish this for the afternoon, and then we will maybe hear from them again. So is there any other discussion on this motion? All right, then Yars, you wanted to vote on this one. So Yars and students, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, commissioners, you have been advised. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay, so we will not close. We may hear from you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are going on to the Clerks of Assembly.
Thank you, moderator. The recommendations for the Clerks of Assembly report will be moved and seconded by Sujin Chung, Presbytery of Eastern Hong Kong, and Joyce Januszewski, Presbytery of Superior. I see Sujin is in the room. Joyce, if you're here. Oh, there she is. Good. Thank you, Joyce. So they're both in the room. Before I get to the recommendations themselves, I'd like to mention that the General Assembly Office was pleased to facilitate the service of repentance for racial bias in the PCC as directed by the 2023 General Assembly. A service which was promoted as a service of repentance, healing, and hope took place on the first Sunday of Advent in 2023. It was a well-attended, grace-filled service hosted by the Reverend In Ki Kim at St. Timothy's Presbyterian Church in the Presbytery of Eastern Hong Kong. And there were representatives from a number of congregations across the city and beyond taking part in that service. There are only 3 recommendations this year in the Clerks of Assembly report. The first two relate to an overture asking that the law of the church be changed to allow elders or diaconal ministers, when needed, to serve as interim moderators to help alleviate the interim moderator workload currently shouldered by ministers. As many of you will know, there are several presbyteries across the country now that have more vacancies than ministers, and many of those vacant congregations could remain vacant for some time because in many of the circumstances for this foreseeable future, it appears as if they may not be able to, may not have the resources to call a minister. So those are a little bit of the background on why there's a overture asking that there be some support for ministers in this way. And the full rationale and the legislation are outlined in the report. All that the first recommendation, CLK 001, asks is that in keeping with due process, that the proposed legislation, it's only proposed at this point, the proposed legislation be referred to presbyteries and sessions for study and comment. This will give the church an opportunity to think about this, to look at what's being proposed, and offer comments back to the Clerks of Assembly to help us shape where we might be going as a future in the future in this way. So our plan, of course, would be to receive this as many of comments as we can get from across the church, use that to shape our thinking and our decision making, and we will bring another recommendation to the 2025 General Assembly.
Who's your mover and seconder?
It's Sujin
Okay,
Chung
that's
and
done.
Joyce
Okay.
Januszewski.
Okay. So, okay, microphone 3.
Moderator Amanda Curry, Presbytery of Assiniboia. I just want to speak in favor of this recommendation. I serve in Assiniboia, which is the southern part of Saskatchewan, and I've served in Saskatchewan throughout the 21 years I've served in ministry in the PCC. And the struggle is real in the part of the country where I live. Right now in northern Saskatchewan, there are 2 ordained ministers who are serving the church. One is Stewart, who is officially retired a while back, but he's serving again. And there are literally congregations where that presbytery has not been able to appoint an interim moderator at all. Lay leaders within the presbytery are helping. Sometimes there are session meetings for one congregation that are moderated by Zoom by a minister of another presbytery who's also a retired minister. It is a real struggle, and the proposal from the clerks for our consideration sounds to us like a helpful step. And so I really would encourage you to presbyteries to consider, and not only to consider your own situation where you live, but also to consider other situations in different parts of the country where this could be very helpful for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Moderator Kathy Fraser, Grey Bruce Maitland. I speak in full favor of this motion, but I would want to just add a real encouragement to get on it, because the January 31st, 2025 is going to be with us before we know it. I doubt sessions or presbyteries are meeting over the summer. Things take time to get going in the fall. I know some of the sessions in Grey Bruce Maitland don't meet every month. And I know that our presbytery only meets twice in the fall. So I'm not asking for a change of date. I'm just really encouraging all of us to make sure that we make this a priority in our sessions and in our presbyteries, to make sure that this gets addressed.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Barry Holtzlander, Presbytery of Assiniboia. Amanda Curry is currently my interim moderator. I'm a lay missionary serving the congregation in Moose Jaw, St. Mark's Presbyterian. And I don't for a moment want to minimize the work that this puts on ministers, particularly retired ministers, but I've been working in an interim basis in the Presbytery of Assiniboia since the middle 90s. And so I've worked with a number of interim moderators, and none of them has ever said, I wish I had more to do. And I've never been part of a congregation or been preaching on a long term in a congregation that said, you know, we see our interim moderator too much. It's impossible, as things are, at least in our presbytery, to give adequate oversight that an interim moderator is supposed to do to all the congregations that need it. And so this issue often comes up as the workload of the ministers. And of course it should be, because that's a critical component. But it's easy to lose sight of the fact that it's a rare congregation that doesn't need what an interim moderator provides. And if you're stretched so thin that you do your meetings by Zoom, nothing wrong with Zoom, I love Zoom, it does all kinds of fabulous things, but you're doing that because you're the interim moderator of 3 different congregations, at least one of those congregations is going to get the short end of the stick, and probably all 3 of them, while burning out a minister who probably would much prefer to do other things. I understand that parts of the country don't work this way. You don't have this kind of issue. Generally speaking, in the Presbytery of Assiniboia, we've almost worked our retired ministers until we bury them. Not only is this bad stewardship, it's disrespectful to address this issue in the same way that we address the difficulty of congregations in a long-term vacant pulpit and the sacraments. The Presbyterian Church is quite capable of making bold steps. This doesn't sound like one maybe, but I think it is. And I think we need to think seriously about what this is doing to the health of the congregations in each of these presbyteries that is so desperately short of ministers.
Thank you. Microphone 1.
Harry Curry, Presbytery of the Northwest. I speak in favor of this motion, also coming from a presbytery that sort of has, 1/3 of the ministers for the number of actual congregations, and over a lot of miles. But one of the concerns I have, and so this is kind of more of a question, is will the clerks be, the issue for me is what kind of training will be available to these people, and will the clerks be suggesting how that training will be done next year?
Yeah, thanks, Harry. I guess step 1 is this something that the church wants to do? And if the answer is yes, and probably in the background, we would be preparing just in case the answer is yes, certainly we could provide guidance for how this could take place, either through the national office or maybe perhaps through our seminaries, something like that. We would try to work out some way that adequate training could be made available if that's the direction that the church chooses to go.
Thank you. Microphone 4.
Moderator John Borthwick from Knox College. I understand I require permission of the court to speak.
Okay.
I'll await that permission.
All right. I see we need a motion, Mr. Clerk. Are you agreed? Commissioners, are you agreed that for John? Oh, great. Thank you. Go ahead.
The General Assembly probably should have had that clause forever in my career in ministry, but just speaking into what I saw in the report related to, and Harry's question was perfectly timed. It says that these persons would be trained in pastoral care and polity. I'm well aware that through St. Andrew's Hall, there's a polity course as well as a sacraments course available for lay people. Knox College also hosts a in-person polity course and sometimes virtual that's been taught by Don Muir and others over the years. The pastoral care one is one that we hear a lot at Ministry Forum from lay people who are looking to be able to visit in hospitals and nursing homes, being able to both offer care, spiritual care and pastoral care to members of their congregations, and also around the area of how does one pray? How do you pray? One of their biggest concerns is what if someone asks me to pray? If I go to the hospital, if I visit in their homes, if I offer this pastoral care, surely only clergy might be able to know how to pray, or there's some challenges around that. So I see 2 areas of training that would be really helpful, maybe embedded within pastoral and spiritual care, conversations around prayer. I think one of the reasons why I'm speaking is exactly what Harry was saying. How would we make sure that this would happen? Ministry Forum would be happy to provide some of that piece. If people were wishing to have conversations with Ministry Forum and myself, what I'd love to hear from the church, we have some capable folks who work in our seminaries across the country, but I would also love to know who in your presbyteries would you say is, for lack of a better expression, one of the best pastoral carers. And that could be a layperson, that could be clergy, that could be a chaplain. If you could feed that information to myself at ministryforum.ca as the representation of the church here, we'd love to know who those people are, because we'd love to involve them in developing some training for pastoral care and certainly in the practice of prayer. Thank you.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Thank you, moderator. Robert Adams, Presbytery of Seaway Glengarry. Inherent in this report, pardon me. Thank you to the clerks. I appreciate the work that they have done in the report, and I understand the necessity and the urgency that lies behind the prayer of the requests that are here. There are a couple of things that I think we as a court of the church need to be aware of. Inherent in the report is a change to our understanding of the theology and the doctrine of ministry, where we are changing the role of the ruling elder and the teaching elder within sessions. It is up to a General Assembly to do that, so that is ours to do. But I think we always need to be aware when we're making big changes that we're kind of doing that, which then kind of leads me to a couple of questions more than comments. The first is, if we are allowing ruling elders to moderate session, then why aren't we making that a consistent change throughout all of the polity of the church? In other words, why shouldn't my elder be moderating session as opposed to myself? That's one question, and that the clerk may wish to get into. It may be too big for this afternoon, and I understand that. The other question that I did have, however, that I think is slightly more bite-sized and manageable, has to do with, on page 2 of the report, there's reference to changes that we have already done to allow, or that we encourage ruling elders to convene search committees, and that we have in the past made the change to allow ruling elders to administer the sacraments. And in both of those cases, we did so saying that the ruling elder who would be doing those things was part of the session, of the congregation and the session in which they were fulfilling this office or this purpose, noting that we believe in the idea of being called into community, and indeed that's one of our foundational beliefs that we have held as Presbyterians since the 1600s and the first national covenant. So I just wonder why we had deviated from that position at this point. Thank you, moderator.
Do we want to try that?
Well, moderators asked if I wanted to answer that. And what I would say at this point, Robert, is I thank you for your comments. And that's exactly the kind of thing I hope the church will wrestle with between now and the end of January, and send those comments to us so that we get a sense of where the church is at, and things that perhaps we have not thought about in the legislation. So just because this is what we've got now doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to have next year. And I really appreciate the thinking that you've done already, and hope that others across the church will contribute to that conversation.
Okay. Microphone 3 next.
Ruben St. Louis, Waterloo Wellington Presbytery. I'd like to move an immediate vote.
Okay. And you have a seconder? Okay. We have Gail Murdoch. Okay. Several seconders. So hold on. We're just noting that. So we are at a motion for an immediate vote. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. So now we are on to voting on recommendation CLK 001. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried.
Thank you, moderator. Clerk CLK 002 simply asks, it's kind of a housekeeping but important process recommendation, simply asks that the plans and the steps outlined in this report be the answer to this overture.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded.
Moved and seconded and is before you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried.
Thank you. So moving on to recommendation 3. I just want to remind the principal clerk, I'm not over there keeping notes. Remember, write down that thing about Ruben. He's in such a hurry all the time, all these immediate votes. So.
I almost forgot what I had.
Yeah, okay. Recommendation 3, following the adoption of remits B and C 2019 regarding the definition of marriage and the ordination of LGBTQI plus persons, the General Assembly directed the Clerks of Assembly to propose guidelines to facilitate calls and elections of LGBTQI plus candidates. Now, the original guidelines were adopted in 2022, but as often happens, once the guidelines were applied to the real life of church courts, it became evident that there were there were aspects of the guidelines that required some clarification, particularly how liberty of conscience and action applies to participating in the ordination and inductions of ministers and the ordination and installation of elders. So I hope that you've had a chance. People have talked to me, so I think a number of you have read through this carefully already, but the history of what has brought us to today's recommendation is outlined in the report, the steps that we've taken over the ensuing years. The recommendation that is before the General Assembly today is in bold text, and it states that a person may vote against an ordination, induction, or installation, provided, and this is the part that's new from last year, provided that reasons given do not contravene the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada.
So you have this recommendation before you. It has been moved and seconded. Microphone 3.
Moderator Bob Sim from the Presbyterian of Hamilton. A question. That original part, vote against the ordination, induction, and installation, was that part of the thing that was approved under the Barrier Act?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Therefore, doesn't it take another Barrier Act to change it? It just can't be a motion of a.
Well, no, this was not. This is not a barrier.
No,
it's not a barrier.
It's
No,
not, okay.
yeah.
So then back
Now, if I was sitting over there, I could have said that.
Right.
Yeah, this was not a barrier act. This was the General Assembly asked the clerks to provide guidelines to kind of go along with those decisions about the remits. So that didn't go down under the Barrier Act, but we proposed guidelines to be used by the church. They were changed a couple of times. They referred back to us last year because the Assembly wasn't quite satisfied with the wording. And so this is our attempt at just changing one sentence or one part of one sentence in the guidelines.
Okay. My further question, moderator, would be if the initial intention was to allow the liberty of conscience in same-sex marriages where we have the dual pathways, right, that you can choose one or the other, wouldn't this then be negating the concept of liberty of conscience because it's a circular thing? So this is the reason why you have it, but no, because you can't. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, you can. I'm not quite sure I followed the question.
So the actual remits that were adopted basically say that liberty of conscience around the ordination of LGBTQI persons married or single is limited to what is written in Remit C. This is regarding ordination, right? That liberty of conscience and action regarding participation in ordinations, induction, and installations be granted to ministers and ruling elders.
Right.
That's the full text of the liberty of conscience provision for Remit C. After that, the Assembly asked the clerks for some clarity around how do we apply those guidelines, and that was presented a couple of years ago. And then last year we proposed an amended version of that, and then again we're proposing one now. I think the understanding here is that so if liberty of conscience and action regarding participation in ordinations, inductions, and installations be granted to ministers and ruling elders, what does that look like? What does participation in ordinations, inductions, and installations look like? So in the guideline that we provided before, we had said that a person may exercise that liberty of conscience and action in a way that such a person may, without fear of censure, abstain from voting for the ordination, induction, or installation, or vote against the ordination, induction, or installation, or send any regrets to any meeting dealing with the ordination, induction, or installation. And then we clarified that this year by saying, vote against the ordination, induction, and installation, provided the reasons do not contravene the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. So as long as you're not providing a reason that is voiced that says my vote against the ordination or the induction or the installation of a person is based on a reason which now contravenes the accepted doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. If that happens, then the liberty of conscience would not apply.
Okay. Moderator, maybe I can make my question clear, but I don't think that quite answered it. If you say the part A, which is vote against ordination, induction, or installation, the reason why the person is maybe voting against that is because of that they don't agree with the ordination, induction, and installation. But then when you don't say part B, provided reasons do not contravene the doctrine, isn't part B negating part A? Is that, am I not clear still, or?
So if a moderator, if a person said there's a vote around the ordination of a particular candidate, they can just say, I vote against this, and say nothing. And that's their right.
Okay.
They've not said anything. That's their right. You know, I won't further comment. That's just their right. Anyone can vote, and you don't have to explain yourself. But should you choose to explain yourself as to why you voted against the ordination of a particular candidate, and that explanation says, I voted against this because this person happens to be in a same-sex relationship, at that point, we're saying that because that now contravenes the accepted doctrine of what we have accepted around the eligibility of all people to be considered for ordination, regardless of sexual orientation, gender status, things like this. As soon as you voice that, which contravenes our policy, our doctrine, that's when liberty of conscience would not be in effect, and you could be ruled out of order.
Thank you, moderator. I'm a process person, and I like to see how things affect other things, and I accept that answer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Victor.
Microphone 3.
Thank you, moderator. Roland DeVries, Presbyterian Montreal. I guess my question is around the second point as well, the change. And I just want to note that both the clerks have said, when they explained it, have said, use the word voiced or given, but that is not in the language of the recommendation itself. And those are two quite different things. So someone can vote against the ordination or induction or installation, provided reasons do not. That means reasons they hold do not contravene the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church of Canada, versus provided reasons voiced do not contravene the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. To me, those have two quite different meanings, and I'm just seeking clarification around which it is and whether or not the language in the recommendation should reflect that.
Do you want to go for that, Don?
Well, I think the part of the answer is we're satisfied with the wording as is, unless it's amended here, but we don't know, when a person votes, we don't know what they're thinking. When a person expresses it out loud, then we would know whether or not their reasons contravene. We would hope that, generally speaking, we don't contravene the doctrine of the church. And I'm not sure I'm explaining this right, but the Victor's the articulate one. I'm the good-looking one. He's the articulate one.
And I'm not keeping notes, Don. I think you actually explained it very well, Don, when you said that the words provided reasons do not contravene. How would we know what those reasons are unless they are voiced, right? So if those reasons are not voiced, we would not know. Therefore, it would not be an issue. The wording is so that provided reasons do not contravene just says the only way we'll ever know is because someone voiced them, or someone wrote them, or someone did something that publicly stated them.
Thank you. I think microphone 1 was next.
Yeah.
Harry Curry, Presbytery of the Northwest. I understand that this wording was changed because we did have before something about voicing it, and we changed this so you are not supposed, any of us are not supposed to vote against an ordination, induction, or installation if the reason is it contravenes the doctrine. That's for all of us. And whether we voice it or not, we know in our hearts whether we've contravened the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, and it's incumbent upon us not to contravene the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. You have other options. You can abstain from voting, or you can send regrets to a meeting if that's how you want to exercise your liberty of conscience. But I think it's very clear that if you want to vote against something because you don't like the theology of the Presbyterian Church in Canada, don't do it.
Microphone 4.
Moderator Amanda Curry, Presbytery of Assiniboia. Some of what I was going to say, Harry has covered. I was going to say something along a similar vein. I'd like to, I speak in favor of the recommendation with this particular change in the wording. I believe that the liberty of conscience that's provided there in terms of the ability to abstain, the ability to send regrets, is adequate. I believe that when it comes to voting on the ordination, induction, or installation of an individual, whether that's because they are a member of the LGBTQI community, or whether that's because they have a traditional view of marriage and perhaps you don't have a traditional view of marriage, that it is, we now live in the situation where our church has adopted 2 parallel definitions of marriage. And this recommendation is, I believe, worded in such a way to help us live into being together, staying together, even though we disagree on this point. And so I think to me, it's not about whether the reasons are voiced. I think it's calling us to pay attention to our conscience and to abstain if we need to, but not to vote against someone because of their identity or because of their stance on that particular question, to say we've agreed to live together with that difference. And so someone with a progressive view would also need to not vote against the ordination of a person who has a traditional perspective on marriage. And we are invited to not vote against someone because they belong to the rainbow community. This is part of our living into having 2 parallel definitions, and to not discriminate one another or try to vote each other out of being in the church. We're in the church together. I hope we can stay in the church together. And I think this provides a little bit of clarity on how we will do that in the courts of the church.
Thank you. Microphone 2.
The moderator, my name is Adam Hanna from the Presbytery of Vancouver Island. I submitted an amendment, or a motion to amend.
Oh, let's just get it on the screen.
We'll figure out what it is that I had to. Not quite ready yet.
Okay, we're going to take a 2-minute breather break and get this one ready. Not 2 minutes. It's going to be as long until it gets up on the screen. So don't go anywhere. Discuss among yourselves. We are expecting it momentarily. So, commissioners, your attention, please. So, microphone 2, please identify your mover and seconder on this first.
Sure. I was myself the mover, Adam Hanna from the Presbyterian of Vancouver Island, and the seconder was Reverend Jen Geddes from the Presbyterian of Vancouver Island.
Okay. Okay, that's proceed.
Sure. In order to quickly clarify what was here, I was just going back over the report, and this is how it was stated in the report, is that induction of the or installation of an individual if the publicly stated reasons for that vote contravene the adopted doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. So I was just going by how it was worded in the report and thought we should add that in to make it clear,
Okay.
even though I think we should go with Reverend Curry's in our hearts. That's what we should be following.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Discussion on this motion to amend. Let the clerk say something first. You want to say something?
Let's see what Harry has.
That's right. Microphone 1, go ahead.
Curry, Presbytery of the Northwest, and I speak strongly against the addition. It is not just what you state, and Amanda explained it very well. It is, we're not to vote against and contravene the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church either way, whether it's from this side or that side. We're trying to build, have a church that both sides of this are welcome. And so I speak strongly against this amendment.
Thank you. Okay, microphone 4.
Thank you, moderator. Bethany McCaffrey, Presbytery of Pickering. I speak against the proposed amendment. Having just been in conversation with some students who are in their discernment process and talking about freedom of conscience, the clerks can correct me if I'm wrong, but as I currently understand it, part of freedom of conscience holds that we cannot hold the ordination of one side or the other as being invalid. And that's not something that is public, is kind of articulated as being public or private. And I think that to vote against on that basis, whether it's publicly stated or not, is a way in which we are indicating our feelings that it is invalid. And so I think it introduces kind of a slippery slope in which we, as Amanda articulated earlier, are voting each other out of certain courts. It provides that opportunity. So.
All right, thank you. Microphone 1.
Good afternoon, Bruce McGuire, Presbytery of Ottawa. I'm very much strongly against this amendment because it leads to hypocrisy. If you are voting, if you do not agree with what is happening, you should abstain. If you go against your conscience, we have enough problems. We don't need to add hypocrisy to the list. Thanks.
Thank you. Microphone 3.
Yes, moderator, through you, Greg Smith, Calgary McLeod. I mean, maybe it's just the way my mind works, but when I read the amendment here, I immediately thought, oh, so it's okay to privately state reasons that contravene the doctrine of the Presbyterian Church in Canada. And I don't think that's the spirit of what we're trying to do here. I don't think these sort of conversations actually as privately, certainly not publicly. I think the motion was, the original motion was fine as it was stated, so I'm voting against the amendment.
Thank you. Adam, you're the mover, so I'm going to let the person be first. You get the last word.
If I was to withdraw my motion at this point.
Have you talked to your seconder? You're okay? Okay, so with the court's permission, that he withdraw his motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? It is withdrawn.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're back to the original motion. And we've got microphone 3 was first.
Andrew Campbell, Presbyterian of Halifax, Lunenburg. I guess I have a clarifying question. It was for the amendment. I think it still is pertinent to this based on the discussion before the amendment where there's a bit of an implication about what is public or not. And I guess my question for the court is whether or not something has been publicly stated, not at the current time, but in previous times where there is much public record of the court of varying opinions, what would take place should one vote against in that way? So I guess I'm looking for clarity from the court in that way, that the provided reasons, whether they are stated at that day and that time, or whether they have been provided across the life of someone within the church. And so I would ask that question to the clerks.
Well, I think maybe this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You put up your hand to vote for or against something. We don't know what's in your mind, so whether, regardless of what your position publicly stated was 6 months ago or 3 years ago, at an induction, you put up your hand, you're just voting, and we don't know what is in your heart and in your mind at that moment. So I don't think we would hold you accountable to what you said 6 months ago on the day that you're voting.
Yeah, moderator, we can't link these things. So I think that's pretty clear.
Microphone 4.
I would like to start with thanking the person who brought the motion to amend forward, not because I agree with it, but I think we had a really wholesome discussion about honesty in voting in your conscience and how to approach this. And so I thank you for that. But I would like to call the vote immediately, if we may.
Okay, this call for an immediate vote. Do you have a seconder? No. Second.
I bet you Ruben wants to second that.
We need the name of the mover, please.
Sorry, I thought you knew me by now. Sorry, Victor, I'm going for that prize that doesn't exist. It's Laura Payne.
Laura Payne.
Oak Ridges.
Laura, okay, Oak Ridges, okay. So we're calling for the immediate vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. So we are now voting on recommendation CLK 003. We are asking the YARs and students. YARs and students, all those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Commissioners, you are advised. All those in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Thank you. No, it wasn't amended. We just voted. We did it the immediate. Okay, now we got to vote. So we did the immediate vote?
Did we? Okay, I think we voted on recommendation 3 too, didn't we?
We did it,
Yeah.
but you missed it. Yeah.
I just can't leave him alone over there.
The clerk has temporarily lost his mind.
I guess I can't retire. We did the vote. And then we did yeah. Now you know why I asked sometimes. Moderator, I thank you, and I thank the commissioners for that fulsome discussion. And that brings us to the conclusion of our report. So it's moved and seconded that the report as a whole be adopted.
The report as a whole. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And I think we are, NIMC, are you ready or do you want till tomorrow to come back up? Okay, all right, so it'll be tomorrow. Thank you. So just advise us tomorrow what's the outcome. So announcements. Hold just a second, we're conferring. Okay. So just an announcement that the minutes of the 3rd and 5th Sederunts have been posted on the PCC website. If there are typos to the assembly office, questions of substance, see the clerks. Thank you, and go ahead. Announcements.
Thank you, moderator. And those minutes are probably in the process of being posted now. At the back of the room to my left, you will see green dots on the wall. They're actually green papers. That is for those of you who are returning to the airports. Will you please check the time of your departure as well as the time that you are to leave the university? By you checking beside your name, it indicates that you have seen it, you are aware of when you need to be in front of King residence for the departure. If there is any information on that is incorrect or you have any concerns, please see Marjorie Copeland in the Assembly office as soon as possible. We will check that again tomorrow, and hopefully I won't have to be asking certain people to go to the office.
I'll do that for you.
Okay, great. Also, after this evening's Sederunt, will the special committee read the apology? Please meet over by the charge table area. And a reminder of Presbyterian College gathering tonight in the main floor lounge. Thank you, moderator.
Please stand. The assembly is adjourned to meet here again in the Athletic and Recreation Center tomorrow, Wednesday, June 5, 2024 at 9 o'clock in the morning. Let us pray. Lord Christ, you are the beginning and end of all of our journeys, for we live our lives in you. We do not know where the journey of your church in these days will lead, but you do not leave us unchallenged. Thank you for those whose words and questions have stretched us and sent us out to search for you. We pray your love and blessings on these, our friends, co-workers, and neighbors, that we might continue in good spirit and to be engaged with the issues of truth and healing and reconciliation as a church. We also issue some prayers for Dylan, the young man who was on the Zoom screen today, prayers for him and his family. And now receive this blessing. May the blessing of God surround us. May we be safeguarded, loved, and cherished. May people of faith inspire us. May wisdom and justice empower us. May we be wise and strong and creative. May we celebrate life and hope. May God's image grow within us. May the gospel of life sustain us all the days of our journey home. Amen.